The party is taking away more and more freedoms every day from the Chinese people, cracking down more and more on everything in Chinese people's lives, and at the same time lying and coercing and cheating and hacking and stealing. Wartime scenario plans like hacking infrastructure and hacking the water supply and electric grids and all that kind of stuff, all laid out so that the West, when push comes to shove, when we do end up in a situation where there is conflict with China, they have so many tools to be able to coerce the West into stopping.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by our friends over at Firecracker Farm. Today we're going to be talking about China, their global influence, what the reality is like, life in China, specifically for people from the West, access to information, propaganda, how they control information, and an extension of that, their society. My guests today are Matthew Tai and Winston Sterzel. They host a show on YouTube called The China Show, based on their own experience firsthand living in China. Matthew is an American YouTuber, a political commentator, and a travel vlogger. He is also a commentator on political and social issues in China. Winston is a South African vlogger who lived in Shenzhen in Guangdong, China for 14 years. He moved to China in February 2006 after attending a business meeting in Shenzhen the previous year. Between the two of them, I believe there are 24 years of firsthand experience living in China. They both have moved out of China with their wives and families, both of which were Chinese citizens. Let's get into the show. The best start, honestly, probably for the audience is you guys need to introduce yourself and explain how the hell you met. How did a South African and a dude from Philadelphia just, casually cross paths in, China, just down the road?
Sure.
Fire away.
Yeah. Well, should we get going then on our story? I'll tell you. Well, it's an interesting story. I went to China on a business trip in 2006.
Yeah.
And I went there for 3 days, and it was an amazing experience for me because having grown up in South Africa, it's not the most vibrant, place. The cities aren't all that big. Go to China. I went to Shenzhen, which is this tech hub, and it was kind of a crazy, chaotic experience. It was vibrant, interesting, filthy, but at the same time, there was a lot of promise. And I thought, this is really cool. I really want to be here. So I went back home. I sold everything, and I went back to China, and I thought, this is where I want to go and have an adventure. I very quickly learned that nobody can speak English, that it's very difficult. Visas were difficult. Everything was difficult. And I actually ran out of money and it ended up on the street for a couple of days, but I managed to work my way up. It was kind of fun. Anyway, it turns out that when YouTube came along, people back home were concerned about me. They would ask, like, what are you doing in China? China's crazy. They'll execute you for saying the wrong thing, that type of thing. And it wasn't like that. So I decided, you know what? I want to show people what my life is like here. So I started to upload videos to YouTube because it was a new format. And people started to watch, and they were like, hey, this is interesting. How much does it cost to rent a house in China? What's it like to date a local in China? That kind of thing. And I just started to make videos and got fairly popular. And it turns out I was actually the first person to ever upload YouTube videos onto YouTube from China. That's right, yeah. The original China vlogger. And so I'd already been fairly established, and Matt got a hold of me and said, hey, we should meet up, because he'd also started a YouTube channel, right?
That's right. Yeah. I guess maybe I was the second one.
Yeah.
Originally, we were just making videos to show people back home that we weren't dead. I'll be honest with you, like most people around me thought I was absolutely insane that I wanted to go to China. I was just coming off this backpacking trip I did through Europe, and I didn't want to settle down yet. I was in my early 20s. I was like, I'm going to go check out Asia. So I wanted to go to Taiwan originally, but it wasn't a hiring season for all those kind of teaching English jobs that you get. And I got a job offer from a place in China. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to sell everything. I'm going to go over there. I'm young enough.
Yeah.
Went over there, and obviously people were concerned. So started making videos showing them that life was fine.
Yeah.
Ended up living in China for a while, but we ended up meeting up and starting a custom motorcycle company. And one of the reasons we did that was because we were always doing trips on motorcycles by ourselves. And Winston's very handy. So we started buying these Japanese bikes in China, the highest quality ones we could find, and then modifying them to our liking.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of took off, especially in the expat community. People started to be interested in buying custom bikes and
Lots
doing
of challenges. Yeah.
doing their own little traveling. And we ended up going across the entire country. So we rode all the way through the south, probably 5,000 kilometers on one trip. We did 10,000 kilometers through the north. We did everything in between. And we ended up filming it and doing a couple documentaries that we did for TV, Conquering Southern and Conquering Northern China. And those were well received because a lot of people told us that was the first time they had seen footage of China or a journey through China that wasn't some well-prepared thing through the major cities. This was completely off the beaten path with two guys that could speak Chinese. They were meeting local people, speaking to them about their lives. It wasn't curated by the government or propaganda department. It was very organic.
It was also completely unsanctioned by the Chinese government. We had no permits. Motorcycles are actually seen as something very undesirable. In most Chinese cities, they're actually banned. You can't ride motorcycles into them. Really? So we had to do all sorts of crazy things to get around this. And, so a lot of fun stories. But basically what we were doing was very clandestine. Yeah. And so that's why we got such good footage and natural interactions.
Yeah.
When you were talking about being the first person to upload videos to YouTube from China, I think one of the most common misconceptions, I don't know if there's anything largely but misconceptions, probably about China. There's the government level, the way they talk about it, a near peer adversary, and economic, and we're pitted against each other. I think most people would believe that internet access is probably more tightly controlled, and access to information or ability to upload like that would be controlled. Okay. So how did you get around that?
Well, you see, the thing is, YouTube wasn't initially blocked.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was unblocked in the beginning for about a year or so, maybe a little longer. Somewhere around 2007 or 2008, thereabouts, they blocked it for a little bit. They let it open again, then they completely blocked it. But what made me different from most people is my tech background. Is I was able to, before there were commercial VPNs out there, because now you can go buy a VPN. You see adverts for them everywhere.
Yep.
I actually set up through some friends of mine overseas my own private VPN. And so I was still able to upload when nobody else was able to. So that kind of solidified me as the only, China YouTuber, because nobody else could do it. They didn't have the technical know-how. So that kept me going for a couple of years until you started to get commercially available VPNs. That's how you were uploading, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So that's how we did it. But you know what? The internet is incredibly censored in China. And it's to the point where you can't use anything. People here in the States are used to using like an Amazon Alexa or a Google Assistant or something. That won't work in China.
What is the government stance on VPNs? I mean, if you were able to upload, I feel like at some point in time, somebody in the Chinese government would have at least recognized that and maybe wanted to come have a little chat with you about how you were being able to do so.
Yeah. So that's a great question, because VPNs are technically illegal in China. In fact, a lot of people get arrested all the time for either selling them or having them. It just depends on if you're a political enemy or not. So the average person using a VPN, if they're not using it to do something that the government doesn't like, for example, go on a forum and say, I think that the Chinese government should give us more freedom or something. As long as the person's not doing stuff like that, the average person is not going to be cracked down on.
Yeah, but people being arrested for like making a tweet, for instance.
Here's the deal. People, they get on a VPN and go on Twitter and say something. The government, if it attracts their ire, they will find you. They will have a chat with you. You will get disappeared if it's bad enough. And the thing is, it has gotten worse over time. We call the time that we lived in China as the golden period. Yeah. You could sense it not only on the ground, but even like diplomatically. China just wanted to be friends with the rest of the world, at least, their outward facing opinion. When you met people, they're like, wow, this is really cool. You're from a different country. Let's get to know each other. Yeah. The whole vibe was like, let's just keep moving forward. So all this stuff that is technically illegal, the government doesn't really want people doing. They kind of allowed it. It was this gray area because they kind of wanted people to interface with the rest of the world. Yeah. Maybe get foreign businesses to invest invest in China, maybe set up shop in places like Shenzhen or these places that are these booming cities. And so we were there during that period, and we saw this kind of we thrived in this gray area. The problem is it got so much worse over time. So the stuff that we said was okay back then, like, for example, making videos back on YouTube, it was okay back then because we weren't criticizing the Chinese government.
Yeah.
But it got so much worse to the point where we could upload a video that was completely positive about China. And then towards the end of our China career, we would get visits by the police. We would get inklings that something was wrong. We would have people try to sabotage us because they wanted us to toe the party line to the point where you're reading a script and you're doing exactly what the government says. So nowadays, if you fast forward to nowadays, if you see people making videos, like especially foreigners who live in China, kind of like we did, they are making videos on behalf of the Chinese government.
Yes.
They're not just being monitored. They're doing it on behalf of them. They are getting scripts. They're being told where to go. They're being flown to certain destinations. They're being stopped from seeing anything that we saw. So the whole vibe has changed, and kind of the legal definitions are the same as they were back then, but now they're actually enforced.
Is that what you equate the change? I mean, like you said, the if you were to look at the law or whatever their governing principles where they stayed the same, but their crackdown increased over time. What do you equate that to? Why do you think they started just tightening the noose on that?
I think it's very easy to kind of look at a timeline of when China was in its golden period and then the transition. And I do attribute that to the leadership change.
Yeah.
I know people really over exaggerate the power of like the top politicians or whatever. And really you should look at things like economic factors. But what happened here in China was we watched everyone get super excited for the leadership change from Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping. Mm-hmm. And people actually saw this as a progression of China opening up even more. This new guy, Xi Jinping, he looked like he was actually going to be more liberal. He looked like he was actually going to open up China even more, just from his previous leadership in other areas of China. So people got excited and they watched this. We could watch this excitement even on Chinese locals' faces just disappear over the next few years. So from 2013 to 2015, things were kind of okay. And then we noticed, in particular, 2015 to 2018, it got so much progressively worse. Yeah. And what we realized was that China, it was under the new leadership, it was going from a situation where it needed to be humble. China needed to be humble to interface with the rest of the world, to try to attract people to come to China. And it really got too big for its boots under the new leadership, because the new leadership saw as China already as being mature. Under his leadership, under his iron grip, right, China was ready to start making the calls as opposed to trying to attract people to it. So we watched China go from this idea that they've always had this very restrictive constitution. They've had a restrictive legal system. They've had very, very archaic communist laws. I mean, it's the Communist Party of China. It's the People's Republic of China. And they started to use those laws. They started to solidify their grip on normal people's lives. And we saw that whether it was the internet, we saw it on one of our trips. We were riding, and I remember this like it was yesterday. We were riding through an area that we have ridden through before. And it was somewhere in rural China. And somebody tipped the people off that we were going through the area. Now, we weren't doing anything. We were literally just riding
foreigners
motorcycles.
are riding here, yeah.
And they tipped them off. And there was, I swear, there was a police officer every kilometer posted up on the road with a little notepad writing down where we were and where we were going. And when we got to the town at the end where we were going to stay in a hotel, we were denied access to that hotel. The cops had been notified to go to the hotels and say, absolutely do not let these foreigners here. And it turns out we were in a place where there was a minority group. There's 56 different ethnic minorities in China. And there was a minority group there that had some beefs with the local government. And they, just in case we were some like local or foreign journalists that were going to go blow the story open, they said, nah, get out of here. And we had to ride all the way through the night to get to another place. Very dangerous, these truck roads at 2 a.m. To get to another hotel in a different town just to have a place to sleep. And that's when we started noticing this happening more and more often. In fact, it got so much worse towards 2017.
You know, official discretion is how the law works in China. So if you've got a policeman there and they see someone breaking the law, they are not compelled to do anything.
Yeah.
So if somebody smacks someone over the head with a 2x4, they won't do anything. They actually won't. They'll just watch it. Okay. But if that person smacking the other person says Xi Jinping needs to step down, all of a sudden the entire police force will come down on that person.
Oh, it'll be a national issue.
So, that's the whole point is these laws exist. China has so many laws.
Yeah.
And they're very, like you say, very archaic. Like, for instance, you're not allowed to stay in a hotel with a woman unless it's your wife. You need to prove that you're married. They never enforce that law. Trust me on that one. Now, here's the thing. You've got this problem where the police actually don't care, but they use the law as a tool to silence people that they don't like or to enforce things that they want to. And they always pull it out at the last minute. For instance, things like, you wouldn't know this, but drinking in public is not allowed in China. But I didn't know that for probably 6-7 years living there until a policeman actually that I met, like that I was friendly with, told me. They just don't enforce it. There's no point to enforce it. They don't want to enforce it. It's a hassle.
Yeah.
So the VPN thing, for instance, you're not supposed to be using a VPN, but they'll kind of let it slide until you post something that's not okay, that they don't like. Then they will crack down on you and use the full extent of the law, and you will go to jail.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard me talk about Firecracker Farm and their hot salt. You probably heard other people talk about it as well. If you haven't tried it yet, let me just tell you, you're missing out on some serious flavor. Their hot salt is delicious, and it really makes pretty much anything that you put it on even more delicious. It's hot, but when you use it in moderation, it's not too hot, and the flavor that it adds enhances without overpowering. It is handmade, super premium, and comes in awesome stainless steel push-button grinders like the one I have in my hand right here. You can take them anywhere. Hot sauce, if you've had this experience, can very easily overpower other flavors and always runs out quickly when it's good. Hot salt lasts and lasts. The push grinder holds over 500 plus pumps, and when you consider the refill it comes with, it's thousands of servings, and it's a great deal and a lot cheaper than the sauce. For those of you that like flavor but hesitate because it might be too hot, you can mix it with sea salt to tone it down and still enjoy the awesome flavor. In my personal experience, you can modulate how much comes out of the dispenser. You're in total control of the amount of heat you serve yourself. So if you would like to support our show and give Alex and his family business a shot, head over to firecracker.farm and use the code Ironclad to get a 15% discount on your first order. You will be very glad that you did. Firecracker.farm. If you are into quality gear and you are not subscribed to TacPack, well, then you're missing out. TacPack is a monthly subscription box loaded with professional-grade tactical gear from trusted brands like Battle Arms Development, 9line, 511 Tactical. You have two options. You have the TacPack Standard, which is a $59.95 shipped with a value that usually lands between $90 and $120. Or you have the TacPack Plus, which is $139.95 shipped, packed with about $240 to $300 worth of gear. But here's the kicker. The September TacPack Plus is coming in hot, worth over $330, and it's featuring a record amount of gear. And right now, if you use the code Ironclad, you're gonna get a free tactical gift worth $70, bringing your total value to over $400 just for signing up. So visit TacPack.com, use the code Ironclad, and get the kind of gear that doesn't just sit on the shelf. How'd you guys know it was time to leave?
I would say that it was on our last trip. It was we were doing something called Conquering Northern China, and we had set out to do an epic trip across all of the. If you look at a map of China, all the way up to the northern tip, and then also all the way through Inner Mongolia, which is a province of China that China had stolen from Mongolia at some point. I had previous experience living there, so I was really excited to get back. And we had this idea that we would go above and beyond this time. So we had two guys that we were super good friends with who decided to follow us with cameras. And we actually planned, we never really plan out our trips, but on this one, we had a couple spots that we wanted to make sure that when we got there, everything was there, right? The people were there that we could talk to. There was like some locals that would show us around, that kind of thing. And what had happened was, to go back to Winston's thing, Chinese people would take our content and they would steal it, right? And they would put it up on Chinese websites.
That's right.
So they'd get all the profit for this, right? So what they had been doing was stealing our videos that we had done together. We had this channel called ADV China. We would ride around motorcycles around China. We'd have a talk show We called it the talk show on two wheels. We'd have intercoms in our helmets. We'd talk to each other and have a talk show while we ride around China. Now, what they would do is take those videos and translate them and upload them. But there was one particular video that was wildly popular about China, positive about China, and it was wildly popular on the internet. So they stole this one, and they specifically translated it wrong on purpose. So what they did was we were talking about how China has gotten so much cleaner compared to when we had first moved there.
Yes.
We were glazing China. We're like, they've actually stepped up their game and the streets are so much cleaner than when we first moved here. And they translated it as that China is absolutely disgusting.
And
look
filthy.
at how gross this is. What a filthy country. It's worse. You know, those kind of things. And so because the vast majority of people in China don't speak English, they completely mistook this, right?
Yeah.
So what happened is, fast forward to 2017, we're out doing this documentary. And this guy was supposed to facilitate us meeting this tribe of people in Inner Mongolia. Now, the dude that was supposed to facilitate this turns out to be in the Chinese government, right? Yeah. So he had apparently seen this video, or one of many videos that they had translated wrong, and decided to sabotage the entire thing.
He was such a coward. It was the most ridiculous thing ever because, this guy was facilitating. He was actually working as a go-between because our producer and cameraman, they couldn't speak Chinese like we could. So this guy could speak some English, and he was helping be a fixer to set up with these tribes. And we were going to fly him out along with his Mongolian friend, Inner Mongolian friend. We're going to fly him out. We were going to do this together. And on the day before they're coming out, he's like, "Oh, the flight was canceled." And we checked, "No, it's not canceled." And we're like, "Are you going to come out?" And the guy's like, "We'll get you another flight." And then he's like, "No, actually, I don't like what you guys do, and I don't support you, so I'm not coming out." Eventually, like after trying to worm his way out of it.
Yeah.
But then the guy called ahead to all that. First of all, he just dropped us. We had to go find these tribes because there were these Inner Mongolian tribes that we were going to visit.
Yeah. So the one time we decided to use a fixer, we didn't end up using a
No, we had to find them ourselves. But he called ahead and he told these different tribes that we are these foreigners that are going to come and mock them and make fun of them. And, that sort of type of nonsense. So it was very uncomfortable because when we finally arrived at the first tribe, they didn't want to talk to us and we had to figure out why. And eventually we convinced them and showed them footage of our previous documentary and then they loosened up. But the second guy whipped out a knife and almost wanted to kill us because we were coming to insult them or something.
So in that town, this is where we kind of realized that things had gotten really bad, was in that town where we met the Mongolian guy that pulled out a knife on us. We obviously had to stay in a hotel that night. Now, the whole point of us being there is we wanted to film something called manaijiu, which is horse milk alcohol. It's like a sweet alcohol they make out of horse milk. Sounds weird. But
I would use
one of
a
the
different word. I would not use the word weird, but I mean, I'll let you go ahead and pick the descriptors here.
I'll tell you what, it's not very good. It's not very good.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Especially when you find out that the Mongolians are very different than the Chinese, right? Yeah. These are nomadic people that go out there and every morning they release their horses and then they go corral them back. So it was really cool. We actually got to use our motorcycles and corral these horses out in the middle of the Mongolian steppe. It was pretty amazing. We brought them back and then obviously milked them. That's another story for another time. But anyway, this town that we were in that we had to stay at, we go back to our hotel room and we're just checking over the footage that we got that day of us,
with
corralling the horses and camels and everything.
Yeah, it was on the way to the horse place.
Yes.
So
anyway, we're there looking at all this footage and the SWAT team busts into our room. We're talking, 6 very, very tall guys, body cameras, automatic weapons, just massive dudes walk in there. And then 2 detectives walk in.
Yeah.
And these detectives are from Beijing, right? Wow. This is not normal.
No.
We're in the middle of absolute nowhere, right? They come in and they already know every little thing about us. They knew where we lived, where we worked, where we go shopping. They knew our wives' names. They knew everything about us. And they needed to get some answers out of us.
Yeah.
They had been told to find the guys that are uploading the videos, right? And what that meant was uploading YouTube videos.
Yeah.
They needed some sort of confession from us that we were those guys, right? Now, we just kept playing coy. We said, these videos, and we just kept showing the trailer from our first documentary over and over again.
This has to have been one of the most tense moments ever because on a hard drive lying on the floor was all the footage from our visit to the North Korean border, where we'd filmed where you're not supposed to be.
Oh, boy.
And we'd been on the border, on the water, filming into North Korea and filming the local people in this town where foreigners are not supposed to go.
I just want to say the reason that we weren't supposed to be there is China had been breaking the sanction rules and actually dealing with North Korea at the time. We didn't even know.
Yeah, we'd met
until we got there.
We met North Koreans that were working in China and so on. So we had all this stuff on these hard drives that were on the floor. And you've got the SWAT team interrogating us, and they'd actually taken our Chinese driver of the support car to another room to interrogate him. And while they were like looking through our cameras and stuff, I slipped that hard drive that had that underneath a pile of dirty clothes on the ground. You know, and one of my buddies was watching me, the one cameraman. I'm like, let's just try and get this under here. And they didn't see it. They didn't notice. But that was one of the most tense moments ever.
How far from Beijing were you guys at that time?
Oh, over 1,000 miles.
So the culmination. You understand that means they were tailing you the entire time. Like
yes, we found that out on the way back because of what happened. You can tell them what happened.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, though. They knew we were going to be there because the way China works is foreigners can't stay in hotels, okay, in the rural areas. You get designated hotels. Mm-hmm. So you can go to a big city, like a huge city with millions of people in it, but there'll be only like one hotel that foreigners can stay in. And this particular place was the only hotel that would allow foreigners to stay in like hundreds of miles. There's only this one place. So they knew we would have to stay there. Yeah. So it was kind of easy for them to know where we would end up.
What was interesting was at that time, because of how tense that was, Winston was busy hiding our hard drives in his secret compartment in his motorcycle while I was contacting people that I knew in the Inner Mongolian government from when I lived there. Mm-hmm. And I asked, what's going on with this place? And it turns out that town that we were in was on the Mongolian border. Mm-hmm. And there had been quite a few uprisings against the Chinese government here. Yeah. So if you guys, you know, your watchers and listeners will probably know Tibet, obviously, there's always been free Tibet stuff for, you know, as long as we've been alive, right? Exactly. There's been protests, and you can find, you know, protests in even small towns in America about, you know, free Tibet. The Chinese government's bad. They didn't want a similar situation of a story like that ever breaking out. They've been able to keep the Mongolian uprising stuff very, very quiet. Yeah. So all of a sudden they think there's these white guys over in this random town that is obviously a hot town. Like there's stuff that happens there. There's all these warning signs only in Mongolian script all around the town saying, watch out for terrorists and stuff like this. Yeah. And so they thought maybe that we're there to break the story. Now on the way back, we thought we had gotten off scot-free. Not scot-free, but we were like, okay, let's just play it safe. Yeah. And we kept going through, and we had to meet up with these horse guys.
Yeah, so we get to the horse guy place, and we're doing the horse stuff, and we're rattled from the night before because that's when the SWAT team came in. You know, the thing that really got us is when the SWAT team left, just before they left, because we had the two investigators, and they also called in the party secretary head for the area. Came in, this, you know, big fat guy came in there. And he was talking to the lead investigator. Now, the lead investigator, the woman from Beijing, could speak English, not very well, but she spoke English. She kept asking, where are the videos? Where are the videos? And we kept showing her, you know, like you said, pictures of camels and videos of camels that we'd shot. And they took all our camera equipment apart, by the way, and they checked all the serial numbers, even on the batteries and stuff. They went through everything. Then we heard them speak, because both of us can speak Chinese. We heard her in the corridor speaking to the big party official. He's like, these are definitely the guys. We're going to go back to the office now, and I have a VPN there. We're going to do some research, and we'll be back in the morning. And that's when I was like, okay, screw this. So as soon as they'd left, they finally left, the SWAT team, everything, I said to everyone, okay, pack everything up. We're leaving at 3 a.m., okay? Because it was probably about midnight at that time. So we did, and we left at about 3 a.m., and we just camped out on the side of the road until sundown. Because this next Mongolian camp with the horses was a fair distance away. It was like a couple hundred kilometers. So we thought we'd, you know, get away from it. So we're busy filming the horses and all this stuff. And then the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, turns up. Yeah, in army vehicle. Yeah, and they get out, and then they want to see all of our papers.
The last thing you want to see is you're completely away from civilization. There's no one anywhere. It's literally just rolling grasslands as far as the eye can see, and a military truck shows up.
Yeah. So they want to check all of our equipment. They take all our stuff out. Well, at first,
remember they were like line up, and they like
Yes.
took our photo, and I was like gave like a nice little smile, like don't smile.
Yeah, it was like 别笑. It was like ridiculous. We're like, okay, and they kept like trying to see if they could find something wrong with our driver's license, our Chinese driver's licenses and stuff. They couldn't find anything wrong. Anyway, so then before they checked all our equipment, they first did that. They lined us up, checked all our papers, made some calls, or did all their thing. Then they interrogated the Mongolians that were hosting us and all that kind of stuff, and scared the bejesus out of them, obviously. And then they got into their car, and this really pissed me off because they obviously did this on purpose. They all pile in, all these soldiers get into the car, and they drove about 5 feet. And then they stopped, and then they all got out again, and then they came back and they said, okay, now open your car, empty everything out. And they went through all the devices, and then they found this stack of hard drives that I was telling you about, that's got like the North Korean stuff and all that on it. But they were these kind of rugged external hard drives. They're called lacy hard drives, and they've got like an orange rubber shell on them.
I got one in
so
the
they
next
don't
room.
look like a normal hard drive.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You know what? Yeah, exactly. So they were like pointing at it. They're like, "这是什么东西啊?" And I'm like,
What's this?
这是电宝.
This is
like,
a battery.
This is a battery, like a battery bank, like those things you use to charge your phone.
Yeah.
And they bought it. They actually didn't know it was a hard drive. They thought it was a power bank. So they luckily didn't look any further.
We ended up speaking to those Mongolians there, and it turns out the PLA harasses all the ethnic Mongolians there all the time because there's just literally nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the moment you asked, the moment that we kind of knew the writing was kind of on the wall. We were like, this is not like it was 5 years ago. This is not, China was opening up. China's closing down now.
Yeah.
We figured it out.
Exactly. And okay, there's two different stories of how we each individually managed to, decided to leave.
Well, I was going to ask, how hard was it to convince your wives to leave?
Very hard for me.
Yeah. Not hard for me.
Yeah, very hard for me because my wife is a doctor, was a Chinese doctor, so she had a thriving career and very well established, and it was difficult for her to leave.
My wife was in international business, so she went to school abroad and everything. She was already very familiar with leaving. So.
Yeah. So I guess we could do this in reverse order. I'll tell you how I ended up leaving because Matt had already left. We'll tell that story. It's pretty harrowing, but during our Conquering Northern China documentary, when we were up on the North Korean border, we used a local fixer there in order to speak, because a dude who could speak Korean and all that. It turned out to be, and you may be familiar with the two Michaels that got kidnapped by China in this hostage diplomacy thing with the
Canadian
Huawei
Michaels,
CFO.
I may have heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're two Michaels, and one of those two Michaels happened to be a friend of ours. And had helped us when we were up on the border of North Korea. And I was chatting to him just before he got nabbed. I used to chat to him on WeChat. That's the equivalent of WhatsApp. And he got nabbed and taken hostage and disappeared for a number of years by the Chinese government and very badly mistreated. But when they nabbed him, an acquaintance, because when they take people, they go through all of their contacts, they go through all of everything. I realized now was the time for me to leave, because if I don't leave, I'm next. And that was when I left. But we'd set something up. Maybe you can tell the story of how you ended up leaving.
Yeah, so I had been getting visits from police officers because we, back when we used to do YouTube videos, we'd make them relatively high production. So we'd fly drones and get drone footage and everything. And I'd gotten harassed by a police officer who was asking me why I was flying a drone. Now, we had been flying drones for years, right? There's nothing new about this. Turns out they were just looking for excuses to go after people like us who were doing videos or doing media, not on a journalist license and not painting the exact 100% clear picture that they wanted painted. Yeah. And it turns out they had been looking for me. So I had my visa not registered to where I even lived.
Yes.
My wife and I had bought an apartment, but in China, you basically have to register that apartment in your spouse's name. Mm-hmm. Because as a foreigner, you're not really allowed to own anything.
Yes.
China's a very restrictive society. Anyway, they knew, obviously they tracked me. They knew where I was. They knew what I did. But this specific police that were looking for me that day were looking for me where my visa was attributed to. So their next logical place to go look for me that night was to go to a bar where a lot of foreigners hang out, right?
Yeah.
So they went there and they had my picture and they were going around asking people about me. And I didn't go to that bar.
Yeah.
But my friend was there and he sent me a message. He goes, yo, they're looking for you. And I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So it turns out I decided I gotta get out of here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing was that my wife's, her green card application and everything was already going through. All that paperwork was in order. My daughter was already an American citizen. So what I did was I said, I'm going to go stay with some family across the border in Hong Kong and see what this is all about. Right.
Yeah.
Now, what happened was the next morning when we found out about this, Winston was like, let's get you to the border. And so we know that there's cameras everywhere, like on the highways and everything, surveillance cameras all over the place.
Yeah,
so
it was
I
pretty intense. Yeah.
laid down and you brought me to the border. And I go, this is going to be interesting to see what they say. So I wait in line at the border to get into Hong Kong. And I'm waiting for freedom. I'm like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting there and I go through and everything's fine. But then as I go through the border, there's actually a woman, like a police woman, a border guard that goes up and talks to the guy that just looked at my passport. Mm-hmm. And they're having a conversation about, is this guy named Ma, which is my Chinese name, because my name is Matt. And so she comes over and stops me and she goes, are you going to be coming back into China? And I said, oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Of course. And she goes, good. And then I left and I got into Hong Kong and I go, okay, that means I'm not, that means that something's happened. It turns out later on, I find out that the local government was conspiring with, I believe it was some sort of military that was using this evidence that I took drone footage and put it on YouTube that included like a small military base in the city that I was in. And it's absolute nonsense because the exact same footage can be found on tons of Chinese people's videos on YouTube, right? The exact same shot.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't some secret footage or whatever. But it turns out this is just a culmination of everything they were trying to do to us from day one, when they realized we got a couple of rogue foreigners here that usually say very, very nice things. And in fact, opened up millions of people's eyes to the real China, which was a very positive experience. But that's not good enough for the current leadership. We need to make sure that they say exactly what we want them to say, and definitely don't show some of the poorer areas of China. That was one of the big things we love to do, was give a voice to the poor because they aren't allowed to be on Chinese media. Some of the best people we met in China were poor to middle class people that were living normal lives, and we thought that was the most interesting thing to show, and they did not like that.
They just want the shiny cities, and they want to show high speed rails. And
for sure. So quickly after I got my wife out, my kid out, and we moved back to America. We never looked back.
I mean, it was far more intense than you're making it out because basically it's been
a few years.
We got a message from your friends at the bar saying, look, the cops are out looking for you. And I was like, grab your laptop, grab your clothes, got in my car, drove to the border, dropped you off, and you almost got stopped. It's like you just made it through. Yeah. And it was intense for a while there. Yeah,
it was.
You don't want to back away from that. I fight on always.
Scene 101A, take 3.
If you're prepared for the worst case scenarios, those worst case scenarios are gonna be manageable.
I got out because we weren't at war. We're at war. I'm going back.
I want to quit like anybody else. I just have the mentality I don't.
I thought I knew what pain was up until that moment.
Accuracy is by far the most important thing.
This community aided in who I am. It gave me family.
No fail it's everything. It's a way of life.
All right, action.
I want to thank our partners over at Ammo Squared. They've built what they call America's Ammunition Reserve. Basically, this is an ammo savings account. You can sign up, pick from more than 70 different calibers, you can set an auto-buy budget and either choose a shipping schedule, or you can just let your personal reserve grow. Over time, your ammo stacks up and is stored for free in their climate-controlled facilities in Texas and Idaho until you are ready to ship. There are no minimums, there's no extra fees. It works whether you have a small budget or you just don't want to drop a few grand all at once. Thank you so much, Ammo Squared, for providing this cool service and for supporting the show. I mean, it's rare to talk to people who've had this experience living in China among Chinese people. I mean, I have a variety of questions, but I guess what I keep coming back to is when you're talking to your average Chinese person, whatever description you made, just somebody who is living there trying to survive, and you can get them to a place where, you know, they don't think anybody's listening and they open up about what they think of their living condition, their country. What do they say? Because I know the state-sponsored answer, but what are the and it's a lot like the U.S. too. Like a lot of our political messaging is just BS, you know. And I don't really align well with any politician at this point. I don't even think that they're serving the best interests of the citizens, so I ignore a lot of what they say. And I don't think that, you know, I love it when they ask a politician how much is a gallon of milk or a quart of milk. They're like, it's $1.99 or $17.99. Yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. Haven't been to the grocery store in a while, huh?
Yeah.
What does the average Chinese person say? Do they realize how restricted they are to information? Do they have an understanding of the global picture, or are they just trying to live life?
I'd say there's two groups of people. There are people that have been beaten down so badly that they don't even want to think about the alternative, because the alternative means that you have to start questioning the system. You question the system, you are punished.
Yeah, dangerous.
There's lots of people that know someone that has been imprisoned or disappeared, or at least heard of someone that has done the wrong thing against the government, and they know what that punishment entails. Then there's the other group of people that do have some sort of knowledge of what life is like outside. Either the wealthy people that have been abroad, either the people that have studied abroad. There's people that are curious enough to get on a VPN and kind of see what the outside internet looks like, because China is very much a closed off society on purpose. It's basically runs on an intranet, as we say. So there's two groups of people. Now, both of those groups of people are not dumb. Both of them have people in there that very much know that China is not a free country. They know that where we're coming from is a place of abundance. They know that, and I have a great example, a guy that we met, just to harken back to that Inner Mongolia trip. We met an ethnic Mongolian guy, but he's Chinese citizen, who literally broke down in tears. He has never left his little area because he's not allowed to. And that's very much against what Mongolian people believe in. I met some Mongolians from actual Mongolia, free Mongolia, and they're basically, when they're old enough, their parents want them to leave and go explore and go see things. He's not allowed to do this because he's a Chinese citizen. He has something called a hukou. A hukou is a little book that tells you this is where you're from, this is where you stay, this is where you work, this is where you live, and you don't get to leave. It's an internal passport.
Everybody has one.
Everyone has one. And he came and showed us how they did this traditional method of cooking a goat to buy, we had to slaughter this goat, and then they had to stuff hot rocks inside of its body and then cook the meat within its own skin. It's pretty wild.
Oh, interesting.
But this is an ancient tradition that they are carrying on. And he broke down in tears because he talked to us and he said, you guys get to come to my little place in this world. And I'm so lucky to have met you. And he was so super nice.
Nice guy.
And he said, I don't get to leave. You get to leave tomorrow. You get to go on to the next place and the next place. And whether you stay in China or not, you get to keep going and moving and moving and moving. And that's all I want to do. And I can never do that. And that is a person that is uneducated, doesn't know anything, but still knew enough to know that he wanted freedom and to be able to at least just move, even see something else in China, right? So every class of society, you can't think of people as completely 100% brainwashed. It's just they have no method or reason or way of going against the system.
I mean, there's something else to this too, okay? You guys are Americans. You're used to having the luxury of being able to care about politics. But when you come from the developing world, and remember, China is the developing world as much as they have they have a space program and all this. So it doesn't seem like a developing world. For most of the people within China, it still is. So, I grew up in South Africa, the third world. I lived in the third world, and I understand the mentality. You don't get to care about politics when all you need to do is try to figure out how to put food on the table.
Yep.
Right? And it's a struggle for most people. Also, you have this very well-known Chinese saying, it's called a frog in a well. And it's the story about a frog who lives in a well, and all he can see is this little patch of sky at the top. And, you know, for him, that's the entire world. And a bird comes in there and says, come and see the world. And he's like, get out of here, you stupid bird. This is the whole world. So, you know, when you grow up in a very tightly controlled society like China, where the government force feeds you propaganda from cradle to grave. I mean, the kindergarten kids are being taught how to hate Japanese people. They're being taught how, you know, Chinese people are superior than other races.
A lot of
you know?
eugenics these days.
Yeah, all sorts of things. You get taught all this stuff. You get taught to, you know, worship the party before your own family. So you get taught all this crap. Your state media only feeds you one particular narrative. You can't get onto the internet to get out. You have a very closed-off worldview. So you're sitting in a situation where you're ignorant, you're kept in the dark, you're also just struggling to make ends meet. So there's not a lot of room to really think outside of that situation, except for, of course, the middle class, which is a growing middle class in China. When people start to get a little bit of money, that's when they start to see things, you know, and start to explore a little more. But it's very hard to break out of that. And a huge portion of the Chinese population is still incredibly poor.
What are they told about the West, specifically the United States? What is the painting or tapestry that is painted for them?
That's probably the most important question you can ask, because it's time that people understand what's being taught.
They hate the West. And listen, right now the fentanyl crisis in China is
in America.
Sorry, what am I saying? The fentanyl crisis from China to America.
Well, let's be clear. It's not actually fentanyl. It's just the precursors that accidentally are put together into the scientific milieu of fentanyl. Accidentally.
Exactly. 100%. Well, you know, the whole thing is, in Chinese education and in Chinese society, every person is taught about the 100 years of humiliation. Okay. And this is the Opium Wars. This is when the West came in and divided up China and, you know, basically humiliated them. And they wear this humiliation as a badge of honor. It's like they're proud of being humiliated, you know, for some reason. They make it a big part of their identity.
It's a good government tool.
Yeah. So they're taught that foreigners are the enemy. Foreigners are always out to get China, out to, you know, be mean to China. And so it's okay to get revenge on foreigners, right? And because of the British Opium Wars, it's justified to put fentanyl precursors into America. Because, look, it's a weird mentality in China. Foreigners are just foreigners. Most Chinese people don't know the difference between a French person, a South African, and an American, and a Russian. They don't know the difference. You're just foreigner is one entity. So foreigners are just people that are not Chinese.
Yeah, it's even in the war, Uyghur, and literally just means outside country person.
Yeah, and foreigners are always used as the scapegoat and the excuse for the failures of the Chinese government. So when things are not working out, it's because the foreigners did it. So
very Soviet.
We've seen horrible propaganda, which basically state outright that foreigners are spies.
Yes.
State outright that foreigners are your enemy. They're being taught this all the time. It's never a message of foreigners are your friends, let's work together. It's always the foreigners are the others, and we have to fight them.
So that's always been traditionally how the, what is it called? Like the education system in China works, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how they've been taught. Even my wife's generation, which was the most liberal generation, like the kids that grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
They learn that stuff too, but it wasn't necessarily enforced. It's now being enforced. So if I look at the curriculum now, I did a whole video series on the new Xi Jinping thoughts and the stuff that's actually translated an entire children's textbook.
Yeah.
I wanted to look at what's actually being taught. What's being taught now is not that the rest of the world is your friend anymore, or that China should cooperate. It's that China's better than you, and that country is bad, especially if you're Japan, especially if you're America. Right now, I'd say America is number one top dog enemy. That could always change, by the way. China, and I think a good example of this is China can get mad at a country like Canada or Germany or whatever. And I remember I was in an elevator one time, and for some bizarre reason, that day or that week or whatever, the Chinese government was mad at Germany. And the guy, there's an old man in an elevator, and he said to me, he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from the US." And he said, "You're not German?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Good. Germany's our enemy." And I said, "This is wild."
Yeah.
Like, I had to go look it up and figure out why. Some trade thing. I can't remember what it was. We then went to northern China. And we walked into an area to film this government program that gives jobs to blind people. They give them jobs as masseuses.
Yeah.
And this big gangster comes out. A lot of northern China's run off of these local gangs, local mafias. And this guy comes out, this massive dude.
Yeah.
and he comes out and he goes, "Where are you guys from?" And all you guys were not American. I was the only American. And you all chimed in and said British or whatever. And he said, "Good, because if one of you, if you guys were American, I would have effed you up." and he would have, like, he would have actually called his friends and done something about it, because at that time, America was the enemy.
I've got a great example. I don't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
I went to go to this like market in Shenzhen where all the stolen iPhones end up. You've probably heard about this, but they disassemble them all there, and then they sell the parts, or they rebuild different phones and stuff. And I happened to have an old MacBook for a friend of mine because it was broken, and I knew a place that could fix it. And this place specialized in fixing laptops and phones and things. So I go up and I've got this MacBook and I'm like, "Hey, can you guys fix this?" And the guy said, "No." And he pointed to the trash bin, and all of their Apple devices were in the trash. They'd broken them and thrown them away. iPads, iPhones, their own personal ones. And they said that we will not work on American stuff. America's the enemy. And the reason was there was one of those freedom of movement exercises in the South China Sea, and America sailed some boats through there. And because of that, suddenly America was the enemy. The daft, stupid thing about it is probably about 2-3 weeks later, I went back to the same place. Now they all had new iPhones and new iPads. Of
course.
Because it's a fleeting thing.
Yeah, the way I want to summarize this, what people need to understand now is that this has always been a political tool in China. It's a one-party state, no freedom. This is a country that can use tools like this to bolster nationalism and to make sure that they have public dissent under control, because Chinese people have dissent. They have real problems in life. They have real grievances with the government, and they can't air any of those grievances. So what they do is they have a little pressure switch. Yeah. They go, okay, well, let's hate America right now. They'll turn that pressure switch on and they'll let people complain about America. They'll pump anti-American propaganda all over the place. And then people can blow off a little steam. They're like, okay, let's go find Buick and flip it over and set it on fire, right? Yeah. That's how China works. But the problem is that that's always been a pressure valve that they've been able to turn on and off. It is now the mainstay. Yeah, it is now, America is absolutely the enemy. While we here in the US, we here in the West learn that every country deserves our attention, it deserves friendship, or we need to be diplomatic. China is not diplomatic. They teach everyone there that America is the absolute 100% enemy in Chinese. And then outward facing in English, for their English speaking propaganda, or their English language propaganda, I should say, it's that China is the peacemaker. America's the bully, the belligerent. They are the bad guys. They're trying to ruin everything. We're just over here. We're just trying to be China. We're peaceful. We just want to be friends, right? I think a great example of this is we were on a website. Oh, yeah. And it was like, what was it? Some sort of satellite program?
Yeah,
or something?
Some kind of technology website.
Some technology website. And we were trying to get some pictures of some event that it was during the Hawaii space laser thing.
Yes.
So we go to this Chinese government or Chinese company website, which is state affiliated. Yeah. And we go on the English version, and it's literally like doves.
And it's got like people in lab coats smiling with a test tube or something.
And it was like cooperation, Chinese cooperation with the rest of the world. And you click the Chinese language version of the website, and it was like missiles.
It had like missile launchers and big, Chinese flags and soldiers and everything.
I think that's a perfect analogy for what's happening. Is China's trying to tell the rest of the world that they're the friendly, good guys that just want to trade and be cool with each other. And then at home in China, they're teaching the most unreal hate.
It's horrible, because, my kid goes to school and she'll learn about all the Chinese holidays, and she comes home making a Chinese lantern or something. And in China, they ban, you may not celebrate foreign, like you can't put up Christmas decorations in any of the schools. It's not allowed. You're not allowed to do things like that. It's like the complete opposite.
Or they're painting American and Japanese flags on the ground for the kids to step on.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very frustrating because we see China constantly attacking the West, and America in particular, hacking the infrastructure, taking advantage. They keep catching spies, that are stealing military secrets and taking advantage and stealing IP and all this. And it's happening all the time. But at the same time, everyone's like, China's great. They're a leader in green technology. They're absolutely the enemy right now. The Chinese government wants to see the West fall. They want to be number one in the world. But people are just not seeing it. And it's kind of frustrating to see trade deals and so on.
Well, they're making interesting moves. I mean, for people paying attention to what's going on, Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un, I think they're actually meeting are they meeting in Beijing now? It's within.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So they're
met.
meeting now. And, and Putin just met with, Trump up in Alaska. And then, Zelensky came over. And I was talking to actually an ex-agency guy yesterday. And essentially his take was, they may be trying to create a system essentially where that alliance, their goal largely is probably to devalue the US dollar and create a system where their currency and their alliance trumps no association with the current president, meaning just is, more valuable than what the West currently has going on. And he actually said that's what keeps him up at night. He doesn't know if they're capable of doing it, but they are making some interesting moves. And, and as you're describing that propaganda, I mean, it's an existential question. I don't know if it has an answer. How does the West combat that? I mean, I don't even know if you can, because you can't control that flow of information to that populace. I mean, I don't know what you do.
Yeah, it's impossible to get Western propaganda into China because they control everything. We've got this horrible two-tier system where Chinese government officials are allowed to open up Twitter X accounts and YouTube channels and pump out positive content about China and how amazing it is, and look at our advanced, technology and so on, which none of it's really advanced, to be honest. But they put all this stuff out there, and you've got actual government CCP officials with a Twitter account, and that's allowed. But you cannot have the opposite. You cannot have like a government official from here having a Weibo account putting out propaganda in China. So it's a one-sided war. You've basically got this unfair, unbalanced system.
Yeah, they're diametrically opposed ideologies. And I just,
yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the deal. What you said is important. Trying to influence China within China I don't know how that stuff works, but I think that's probably less important than trying to restrict Chinese propaganda from getting to the West. And I'll tell you why. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people big up how strong China actually is. I think they have to rely on this new axis of evil that they've created that you've just talked about with North Korea and Russia.
China, Russia, North Korea. The acronym is CRINC.
CRINC, yeah. So this CRINC alliance.
They need to work
These
on that.
Countries.
That's not good.
I know. We didn't make it up. There's a Wikipedia article. There's a Wikipedia article about it.
They need a PR. They need a PR guy, because that's not a good one.
No, I don't think it's the CRINC alliance. It's not what I was expecting.
I'll put it to you this way: I wouldn't have allowed that if I was on the oversight board.
No.
That's what it's called now.
Yes,
anyway, this new axis of evil, as we kind of see it as, is in this scenario that they're like China and Russia have never liked each other. They don't like each other. They don't trust each other at all. Right? Yeah. They're always finding things where they're spying on each other and stuff, but they have to be together, because they're all each other's god, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why you end up with these alliances. Your enemy is your friend too, at least when it's tactically advantageous to you.
Because the reason they're doing this is because China still very much needs the U.S. They need the money. They need the customers. They need it. Pretty much everything about trading with the West is very, very important.
That's how China rose out of poverty.
Yes.
It's a lie, by the way.
So to help mitigate that, right? To mitigate the destruction that would be if America did end up cutting off China, they have to make these unfortunate alliances with these other countries that are, definitely don't have America's best interest in mind. So you're in a situation here where China needs the U.S. a lot more than the U.S. needs China or the West in general. And what they're doing is spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to pump a positive message over the sea into America on TikTok, on YouTube, on X, and just blast propaganda in front of people's faces. And we are seeing the public opinion of China change and be more in line with the Chinese government narrative. And what happens then is you're playing the long game. You're getting people that are more accustomed to seeing China, seeing it as a prosperous nation, seeing it as a alternative to the US, seeing these shiny cities, and seeing it as a place to put your money, seeing it as a place to maybe move your business over to, right? Seeing it as not the enemy, but as something that's the alternative to the drug addict homeless problem that China, again, is pumping to Americans on their feed through Chinese propaganda. So we're in a situation now where I think that Chinese government propaganda, they've seen so much return on their investment that they've just increased it. We see more and more influencers being paid off by Beijing. We see more and more English language propaganda getting on people's feeds 24/7. I know family members and friends that know what China's really like because of what I went through and me living there, that are now not believing what I'm saying, absolutely believing what I'm saying, but seeing an alternative, being like, well, why? I'm getting more questions of, well, why do I keep seeing these like shiny cities and like all this new building infrastructure and these new solar farms and stuff? And I have to keep explaining, this is a facade. This is a multi-billion-dollar propaganda effort. To me, that's what needs to stop. I think there needs to be some legislation at some point that says you can't work for the Chinese government, and we can't allow Chinese state propaganda to be boosted and hosted on Western platforms. I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
I think that is the solution, to be honest, because it's so disingenuous. And you know what? Very easy to disprove all of this propaganda that they put out, because you'll always see like, oh, you know, they use in Chinese schools, they're learning AI and robots and stuff, but that's not true. The majority of Chinese schools, you know, don't have air conditioning, and then the paint's peeling off the walls. You know, it's just this image that they're curating overseas by using our own tools against us. That needs to stop.
I don't know where you stand on the whole TikTok issue, but
I have never actually been on the platform.
What's that?
I've never been on the platform. I have an understanding of what it is, but I can tell you this: my daughter. So I have 3 kids: a 17-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 22-year-old. My daughter is probably the most voracious user of it. But it's wild. People are getting their news and deeply held beliefs either from that device or being molded by that device. And it's
and that's an issue.
It's an issue, and it's designed to be addictive. I actually think it's destroying critical thinking skills. I was reading an article the other day where, you know, bed rot. It's the first time I've ever heard it, where an entire generation of people is getting accustomed to laying in bed, doing fuck all for hours and just scrolling. Like, holy cow.
It's crazy. Yeah.
And you can't put it down. I honestly think an EMP device might be the best thing to happen to society.
You're probably right at this point.
You're probably right from that perspective.
It'd be rough for like 72 hours, maybe 96, and depending on how. But I think at the end of the day, we would actually come closer together as a society, and it would also shut down all the BS, like you said, that's just being piped over and piped over, and we allow it. You know, with that also, you know, why do we allow the Communist Party of China to own real estate near U.S. military installations?
Absolutely.
Like, what are we doing? You know, like
you cannot own.
Does it not feel like? It's creepy.
You cannot own land in China as a foreigner.
No.
You can't own anything over there. You can't even own your own business over there. You know, it's such a two-tiered system, and I hate it because they have taken advantage of every single loophole. They set up think tanks over here to steal taxpayer money to fund PLA rockets. You know, the people's 401ks are being used to build China's military. I mean, they do all sorts of crazy things, and they're allowed to do it. And it's infuriating when you know what's going on and when you can understand what's going on.
Especially when there's been legislation, like, not to go back to the TikTok thing, there's been bipartisan legislation to say TikTok is bad. It's Chinese government affiliated, and it could be used for nefarious purposes.
It is used.
And it's still here. It's supposed to be banned, right? We're in a situation now where people still have, we voted on this, right, as Americans, and it's still banned. And do you think for 2 seconds that when China invades Taiwan or goes through some military operation, that they're not going to mobilize all those hundreds of millions of Americans' devices to completely sway their opinion in a massive psyop on TikTok? Of course they are.
And you can add to that with the evolution of AI and some of these video generation platforms at their early iteration that are already becoming hard to parse truth from reality. I mean, to me, I'm worried. I mean, you know, I think the Terminator movie may end up becoming a documentary if we go, you know, if the human species evolves long enough, you know, Skynet becomes aware. It actually I saw a great meme yesterday. It was like, because it was August 29th and it was Arnold. Skynet becomes aware on August 29th at 1. I was like, holy shit, we made it another year, but I'm not sure about next year. But they could weaponize that amount of information, because I personally know in my life, people that they don't take it a step farther than what they see with their finger.
Yes.
And they don't take a breath and ask themselves, is what I'm seeing on this device reflective at all of what I'm seeing in my real life?
That's a good point.
And, you know, that to me is the more of a worry of AI, a tsunami of just unstoppable information. While at the meantime, an actor like China, a nation state actor, is doing something like that.
I think they're already doing it.
They are. This is very worrying because, you know, what we do is we debunk Chinese propaganda. It's pretty much the biggest part of what we do. And we've seen it go from laughable stuff because they always screw up. Their English is bad. They think things are cool, which are not cool. It's very easy to point fingers and laugh. But now they're using ChatGPT and other things to write their propaganda.
Yep.
Now the comments when they attack people in the bots, instead of like bad English,
like you are a white pig liar.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's a very well-crafted response. You know, they're starting to use AI in their propaganda, and it's very effective, and it's getting harder and harder to combat.
And the problem is, it's an ecosystem that is totally optional. People have to willingly participate in that.
Yes.
I live in northwestern Montana. We're getting ready for hunting season. September and October are some of my favorite times of year, mostly because I have no cell service.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that you have this, you go through this bell curve of like fear of missing out to hatred for your device and loving the quiet.
Yes.
I have fear of missing out of what you just said because I would love to
come
live
visit
in northwestern Montana.
Yeah, mate. I mean, you're 100%. The problem is that while it might be something that's seen as optional in the West, in China, it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to use your device for everything. You must have your cell phone with you at all times because it's your payment system. When you buy things, you have to use your phone. It's how you pay all your utilities. It's where you get all your news. It's how you get onto the train in the train station. So your device has become an integral part of who you are. And if you go out without your phone, you won't be able to do basic things like buy a bottle of water or board a train. So it's always with you at all times. And people are so addicted, and I'd say 10 years ahead of the West. So all of China is constantly online, and they utilize that obviously in their electronic warfare against other nations.
Yeah, this gets a bit future forward hypothetical, but like I do see a situation where AI, robotics, all this kind of stuff gets out of control, and Americans in particular start to rebel against that because it has taken jobs away. It's reduced quality of life for a lot of people, and there are enough independent thinking people like yourself. I'm going to go hunting. I'm going to go do stuff outdoors that don't rely on that kind of stuff. They could take it or leave it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I think we could come to a point where people are like, all right, I'm going to go this weird, automated route, or I'm going to go live my own life. In China, I don't ever see that happening. And I see them doing that right now. They're leaning so hard into this robotics thing. Now, I could go on for days about that. The robotics industry is an absolute joke. It is a propaganda tool. They're basically making remote control toys and trying to tell the West that they've already defeated them and, the future of military and stuff. But that notwithstanding, if you look at how China's adopted, like even psychologically adopted AI and adopted robotics as just a given, or even an element of life that people are going to have to do.
Yes. You
kind of see that there is a like you said, diametrically opposed ideologies here. You would have independent thinking people that would say that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't want to participate. But then you have China that can't not participate.
Yes.
Because you can't do anything. You're not connected to the system. So you go to jail at that point, right?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with a guy yesterday. Military background, worked in the highest levels of DARPA. So they solved, a lot of our electronic issues in the military. We would come to them and just ask them for creative solutions. And we were talking about people's reliance on technology, at least in our current generations. And his thoughts were maybe not the generation now, but maybe in a near future generation, because often in the US, right, it can become counterculture or contrarian. He thinks the fix may be one of these generations is going to start looking at people who are so attached to these devices. It'll become a social faux pas. You'll be at dinner, but if you bring your phone out and put it on the table, you're an asshole and nobody wants to deal with you. Yeah. So it'll be so popular that the counterculture aspect of people growing up in America will end up at least rounding off that bell curve. And I don't know if that's going to be the case, but man, I look forward to that day.
Do you know how much vindication I feel right now? Because that's what I've been saying for so long.
But I actually think, though, that's how it would happen. I don't think the people in my generation, I'm probably probably maybe even 5 or 6 years younger than me. I remember pre-internet versus post. I remember the first time I sat in front of a computer when I was a senior in high school. Yeah. My kids don't remember a world pre-internet. So somewhere in between those two, there's a generation that would remember that. But that's how it's going to get solved. It's going to be solved by a group of people who look at you and they just go, you're a dork. And I don't want to be anything like you. And they're not going to use the device. And then these companies are going to freak out.
Yes.
Yeah. Looking forward to that day if it comes around. Yeah.
When high school kids are walking around, you're like, you robo lover, and they smash their head in the
straight
locker.
back into a Walkman. They're just going to be full analog. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually
like
cool.
This. I like this.
Again, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I hadn't thought about that until yesterday when he brought it up, and it's had some free real estate in my head since then. I've been thinking about it. I think it might be the case. And I know you guys, we're completely through the time I had scheduled, but God, I feel like we could talk for hours more. I know you guys are, there's no Nostradamus and nobody can really read the tea leaves, but 5, 10, or 15 years from now, where do you think the trajectory that China is on may lead them?
Look, they're in a bad way.
Yeah.
So why they're putting the propaganda up so much, why they're pushing it so hard. The economy is actually very bad. The numbers that they put out are false. I mean, even the Chinese government themselves admit that they screw with the GDP numbers.
It's not 5%. Let's just say that.
Yeah. It's probably closer to 2, maybe even 0 or minus at some points. But look, their economy is not doing very well. People do not have jobs right now. We're seeing huge layoffs. We're seeing huge amounts of strikes because of unpaid wages. It's very bad. Their demographic collapse is a real thing.
The population
because of the
collapse.
one-child policy. Yeah, they screwed up with that one-child policy so badly that you've got this ticking time bomb. That there won't be enough, young working people to support all the.
Well, I
old
think the
people.
time bomb's already going off.
Yeah. They're in a bad way. So look, the Chinese government is a reactionary government.
Yeah.
Okay, they don't plan ahead. People think that they plan ahead. They don't plan ahead. They kind of just let things go along until the wheel falls off, and then they try to figure out how to put the wheel back on. They don't grease it and do maintenance beforehand.
No, I mean, that's why you see $300 billion debt companies like Evergrande, the biggest property company in China or whatever, is not even listed on the stock market anymore. That's a big deal.
Yeah, so they're in a bad way. So look, unfortunately, when you've got these dictatorships like this, when they get backed into a corner, they need to do something to pull themselves out of this slump. And one of the things that they probably will end up doing is invading Taiwan. I think that's their last hurrah. When it really gets bad, when they really can't hide it anymore, they need something to distract the masses. They need to consolidate their power again. And this has been like a promise that they've kept on the back burner forever. Yeah. Oh, we'll take back Taiwan, which, by the way, they never had in the first place. It doesn't belong to China, but they've convinced everyone that it belongs to them. So they'll be like, we're going to do that. And, excuse me. Unfortunately, I think that might be their last hurrah. And that's something I've never wanted to see happen because Taiwan is an incredible place.
Yeah, I think the whole 5 to 10 year thing is super hard to predict because we don't know how things are going to go in terms of how China's relations with other countries goes. Here's the deal. China is now using said propaganda campaign to convince Americans and American leadership that actually we do need them really badly and that we've always been great partners and we're going to make so much money and we're going to be able to cooperate in the future, when in fact they're doing all of this stuff because it's death throes. You only do multi-billion-dollar propaganda campaigns because you have to convince people of things that are not happening. You have to convince people that they do need China. And so that's how you keep China on life support. That's how you keep them from doing crazy things like invading Taiwan, because at the end of the day, they want to have a sphere of influence, particularly in Asia, where they run the show. They want this kind of axis of power where they get to make all the shots over there. And if that means that they have to repair their relationship on the surface with America, using whatever leadership is in power at the time, then they'll try to do that as much as possible right now. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing China go downhill. And it's going to have to make some sort of domestic readjustment. It's going to have to change in some way. It's going to have to open up and it's going to have to reform if they're going to do something or be successful in the future. But what we're seeing is the party is taking away more and more freedoms every day from the Chinese people, cracking down more and more on everything in Chinese people's lives. And at the same time, lying and coercing and cheating and hacking and stealing the West's assets. And they're trying to get the West to willfully donate into their system or participate in their system, all at the same time while trying to infiltrate those systems and get their people, their governments influence, get their wartime scenario plans like hacking infrastructure and hacking the water supply and electric grids and all that kind of stuff, all laid out so that the West, when push comes to shove, when we do end up in a situation where there is conflict with China, they have so many tools to be able to coerce the West into stopping.
Yeah, and sabotaging.
Mm-hmm. So that's where I see things.
Damn, way to end on a high note, guys.
Yeah, unfortunately. You know what? I got to say, I'm very disappointed because we were heading in the right direction when we canceled the de minimis thing, so that Temu couldn't ship to your door cheaper than your neighbor could send you a letter. And when, tariffs were supposed to be put on China and the TikTok ban was supposed to happen, this was all going in the right direction, and it absolutely would have humbled China and put it in a position where they had to, perhaps behave better. But now they're just so emboldened that nothing's ever going to happen to them, that they are becoming worse and worse. And it's an unfortunate situation to see.
And it makes a person with a room temperature IQ, I would hope, start to wonder, why didn't those things get put into place? Perhaps
exactly
we should start following the influence in money.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely.
Hope you liked today's episode. If you want to check out Matt and Winston's YouTube channel, you can find it over at The China Show. Normal spelling on all three of those. Thank you again for listening to Change Agents, an Ironclad original presented by Firecracker Farm. See you next week with an all-new guest and an all-new episode.